So we're making this recording just for the few people who are not here in session 3. And let's go straight to screen share. Here we go. So here are some of the verbal arts that we're going to look at and discuss. And I'm going to invite the participants to use some of these verbal arts in a story that they're going to tell at the end of the session. And this first one we've been talking about already, the alternating between speaking as the narrator and as characters. And there's this combination of the two. When the narrator acts out the character, like the narrator says, the boy was so scared and the girl was so brave. See, I'm narrating, but I'm also playing the character. So that's an option there too. Let's keep going. Okay, as the narrator and as characters, please vary the speed, volume, and pitch. Pitch is high voice, low voice. Variety is the spice of life. I guess that's a metaphor for cooking, right? Yes, of course it is. Spice. We spice up our public speaking by these variations. I said we were not going to talk about modulation, but I guess this involves modulation, both in terms of volume and speed and pitch. But you don't have to approach this in a mechanical, intellectual way. You can just approach it in terms of acting, which is, feel the character, feel how the character feels in general, and how this character feels at the moment, and speak and move as the character. Staccato, that's an Italian term that's applied to music when each note is very distinct. I am going to the house. When we speak that way to somebody, what emotion generally often are we expressing? Any thought?
Firmness.
Emphasizing.
Emphasizing. We might even be a little impatient or irritated. I am going to do it.
It's like you're trying to drive the point home.
Yes, by being crystal clear. Okay.
Assertiveness also.
Yes. Let there be no mistake. I mean it. Okay, and pause is a very special and powerful verbal art technique. When you slow down and stop, people take notice. If you're not good at it, people get bored and they'll walk away. But if you're good at it, they will be drawn in and they will be wondering what's going to happen next. This is a pregnant pause. That's a metaphor. A pregnant pause. That means something is going to be born out of this. But as we all know, birth does not always happen instantly. Sometimes it takes a little time. So when we pause, and physically, if we strike a pose and do not move for a few seconds, people know something important is going on or might go on. And see what I'm doing now. I've struck a pose, but I'm still talking. The story is going forward, but physically I'm still frozen. So these are options. But do try to include a pause in every few minutes of speaking or storytelling. Try to include a pause, because that will really, if you do it well, it will let it sink in what has happened. Often at a big moment, when something earth-shaking, earth-shattering has happened, we need to take a pause so it can sink in, to use a metaphor, how the character is feeling, how the narrator is feeling, how you are feeling, because something has really changed. And that's a good time to take a pause. We might elongate a vowel. It was a fine day. Okay, we'll just emphasize the word, right? I don't know. Okay, so this is all about varying speed, volume, and pitch. Have each character speak and move in unique ways. Repetition with variation. I'm going to show you some examples of this in a moment. You know, I went to the shop. I went to the beach. I went to the school. I went to the moon, and I still couldn't find what I was looking for. So you repeat a sentence, but you substitute one word in there, and you do it again, 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 again. You can kind of whip yourself into a frenzy. You know, I was looking for meaning in life. I asked my friend, I asked my mother, I asked my father, I asked my sister. Nobody could tell me the meaning in life. That is a very popular verbal art that orators use. Somebody mentioned orating the other day. Orating is not telling a story necessarily, but platform talk, like in politics. You know, my opponent, he promised you this, he didn't give it. He promised you that, he didn't give it. Now he's promising you something else, he's not going to give you that either. Okay. You might want to break into a chant. A chant is one note again and again and again. I don't know, here I am, I will say a word, I will say this word again and again. This is not really a song, it's just a word again and again. And now I might turn this into a song if I have a melody in my mind. Otherwise, I'll just say the word with the melody, the same melody again and again, the same note again and again. Okay, so you have a sense of the difference between a chant and a song. A chant is just repeating the same note. Many religious deliveries are done as a chant. You know, ya ya, la la la, la la la, la la la, hey la la la, hey la la la. One note or a very limited series of notes are repeated. I'm going to show you examples, and I want you to do some examples of this in a couple of minutes, believe it or not. One melody that I like to use is when I think of a melody, this melody often comes in my mind. This happens to be a pop song from the USA many years ago, but I will invite each one of you to choose a favorite song. It could be a cinema song or some other song, but I challenge you to use the melody as you make up the words. You have to use different parts of your brain at the same time to do this, because one part is the melody side and the other side is the thinking rational words. You know, rap is a verbal art that is not singing, it's more of a chant, because I went to the shop, I can't rap, I don't even know what rap is actually. But I know that there's not a melody involved, but there's a rhythm involved. Okay, okay, so these are the main ones that we're talking about. Let me go back. Alternating between narrator and characters, speed, volume, and pitch, characters speaking and moving in unique ways, repetition, and bringing some rhythm or some melody. And let's come off of screen share for a second. Okay, you all have your mic turned off. Vani, please turn off your mic for a second and practice a little bit of this along with me. Can you try to just talk a little bit with a melody in your voice? Can you think of something to say with some melody in your voice? Choose any melody you like and choose any words to fit your feeling. Everyone, just try it for yourself. How do you feel today?
How do you feel today?
Yeah, turn off your mic and just do it for yourself. Because if everyone does it, we'll have it a little. Yeah. Okay, so everyone just talk to yourself a little bit using a melody. Okay, now try something like this. I am the king of the forest. Nobody can challenge me to anything. I will defeat everyone. I am the king. I am the queen of the forest. Nobody here is stronger than me. Use that melody or some other melody, but play the character, the lion who's saying, I am the queen of the forest. Okay, good. You're on your ways. Now, I'm going to show you some video recordings and let's see. I'm going back to screen share. These are all online, so I will send you links to these and we'll just watch some little bits and pieces. The people are going to talk about storytelling here, but they're also going to demonstrate, especially these verbal arts. So we're looking for the demonstrations of the verbal arts.
To have a good story, you have to have three things all working together. There's the teller, there's the listeners, and there's the story. And that triangle has to work. So if you've chosen a story that works well for you, that you have a connection with, and your listeners have a connection with, can have a connection with, then that's a good story for them.
He took down the sail. He wrapped the sail about him and he said, "Sail, keep me warm." But the wind said, "A sail can't keep you warm. I'll freeze you, Kagan." And he blew down from the north, bringing...
Okay, you follow the scene here? There's a sailor in a big sailboat and he's very cold. So he wraps himself in an extra sheet. But the north wind says, "A sail can't keep you warm. I'll freeze you." That's how the wind talks, sort of a deep voice with elongating vowels. "A sail can't keep you warm. I'll freeze you." Everyone try it with your mic turned off. "A sail can't keep you warm." Come on, Anuradha, come on. "A sail can't keep you warm." Yes. Okay, let's keep going.
Snow and sleet and ice. Stories exist as murals in caves, which are kind of the labyrinth of our life. And that what people do is they turn on the light. When they tell a story, they just turn on a light. And suddenly you can see the mural of the story whole. And he heard a long calling down the sea, her singing, "Kagan, Kagan." Kagan, Kagan. Turn ye now to me, turn your back unto the wind, and all the weary windy sea.
Okay, so the wind was saying, I'm gonna freeze you, Kagan. But now I believe this is a mermaid who's singing, or his fantasy of a mermaid, who's singing, Kagan, Kagan, turn you now to me. Don't worry about the storm. I will help thee. Try it. You don't have to get the words right, but get the melody, get the feeling right. Kagan, Kagan, turn ye now to me. Okay, she's comforting him. She's beckoning him. Good.
Kagan,
I think a good story
Now,
comes from the heart.
we're gonna zoom through. And this lady is my storytelling teacher, Laura Sims, who is going to be doing a workshop with my wife beginning a few weeks from now, storytelling and psychodrama. They're going to act out a fairy tale from Romania by Zoom. Laura's in New York and my wife Magdalene is here in Chennai. Anyway, give a listen to Laura for a moment.
Someone asks, what is that story about? And I can tell them exactly what I heard. Even at that moment, they're hearing a different story than the one that I'm telling and the one that I heard. And then inside that is a kind of explosion of visual images that is a secret story, secret to me, the teller, and the audience.
Okay, I'm zooming ahead. Let's see.
Tale, in my own words, that I'm touching humanity as far back as the hearth fires of ancient days.
I was right, I was wrong.
This fellow performed in our Monday night series last month, but I'm skipping over some of these where they have the words memorized, because that's not the type of storytelling that we're working on. Here we go.
Part of it, that comes from my mother. My mother can go to the supermarket and it becomes an epic. When she comes back, she's playing all the characters, you know, a whole story happens. So I think it's probably always been in my blood to tell stories.
In a little village in Hungary, up in the mountains, there lived a shoemaker. He was a good shoemaker. But better than that, he was a wise man. He knew the answer for everything. No matter what you came and asked, he would know. His fame spread throughout the entire country. Rich men, noblemen would pull up to a shop in huge carriages. They would squeeze into the little shoemaking shop just to get a moment of his time.
I think it's important to tell stories about your life. When you start to tell the stories, then suddenly it's like you draw your own attention to your own life. So I think that's really important. And above and beyond that, you know, the stories from your tradition, from all the traditions, there's some wonderful laughs, wonderful tears, and wonderful teaching and all of those things.
That must be the shoemaker. I knew he was a great man. Look how he's dressed. He said, please, please, come in, come in. And he invited him in. He treated him with honor, with respect. After the wedding, he placed him in the place of honor next to the bride and groom. He proposed a toast to the new couple, health and happiness. Everyone rose and drank down that wine. That is everybody but the shoemaker. He just stood there holding his wine. Everybody looked at him. They leaned toward him. They expected him to say something wise, but he didn't say a word. He just pulled his pants away from his body and poured the wine down his pants. Well, some people laughed. Some whispered. Nobody knew what to do. But you know, the whole meal was like that. He took off his hat and he very carefully spooned in peas. He took cabbage balls and put them into the one pocket of his coat, and chicken paprikash and put it into the other. And then he squashed them. Finally, Samuel leaped up and he said, what are you doing? What are you doing? I thought you were a wise man. I thought you'd come here and teach us something. You're acting like a fool. And the shoemaker said, I've been teaching you ever since I sat down. You see, I was the man you threw out this morning. And you threw me out because you thought I was a beggar. And you thought that because of the clothes I wear. When I came back, dressed in the clothes of a rich man. You treated me with honor and respect. It seems you didn't want me here at all. You wanted my clothes. And so, I'm feeding them. And with that, he took a glass of tea and said, "Drink well, my coat." He poured it into his pocket, and he left. Fools look at men's clothes. Wise men see their souls.
So the giant.
This is Diane Ferlat. We're going to see a few more of her recordings in a minute.
Grandmothers, grandfathers, uncles, and my father definitely, telling stories, you know, about this and that. But I really didn't know how important stories were. I took it for granted, because everybody told stories. It was different back then. No one Nintendo or TV and stuff, so it was just something we did. So I got to love hearing the old folks talk. And I tend to like those kind of stories that are drawn from my roots down south.
Eve said, "Adam, honey, why don't you put up the stove while I hang the curtains?" Adam said, "How come you can't put up the stove and I hang the curtains? You just as strong as me. The Lord gave us the same amount of strength. How come you always trying to push the heavy stuff off on me?" "Oh, Adam, there's men's work and there's women's work. Just wouldn't look right to me be doing all that heavy stuff." Adam said, "Look right to who? We ain't got no neighbors yet."
And there then a door at the knocking came.
No, I'm skipping.
I began to discover rhythms. Storytelling allows sound. With my own children, I would hear rhythms like raisins, raisins, all we are is raisins. It's so different in print. Oh, woe is me bones, oh, woe is me bones. Story about bees, and I would watch my son's eyes. And, you know, if he got bored, I'd change the scene. But if he liked it, woe is me bones, I'd keep the story. So because of them, I was discovering that this is different. It's not print, it's sound. And sound is musical. And suddenly, I realized this is a whole medium.
And then the fool, he leaned against his favorite tree. And he prepared to tell a story. He waited for his audience to gather. And before he started, he saw Todd, the poet's son, hiding behind a hedge. Todd had never came. And then his audience gathered. A fly flew down and twitched nervously on his head. A mosquito sat upon his cheek and was about to take a bite. And then the bees were followed by the fairies. And the fool began. Episode 67. Penelope, the girl with 100 rainbows in her pockets. Penelope.
And it's so human. You use the voice and you use the eyes and you use your personality.
Remember that. Remember what he said. He said, you use your personality. You know, many of us think, well, I don't really have a personality. I'm just a regular person. I'm a normal person. But that's an illusion. Each one of us has a very distinct personality. And we can try to hide it, but it might be more advantageous to use our personality in terms of the stories we choose to tell and the way we choose to tell it. So part of this work is thinking about who am I? What is my personality? And how can I use it on the stage? Okay?
You sense you're really talking to another human because stories bring that out. So I love the humanness, and I love the sound, and I love the intimacy of storytelling.
Okay, as I say, I'll send you the link to this. There's a lot more to it. This was a promotional video made more than 10 years ago. You see, I look older than Laura, even though she's my teacher, and that's because it was done a long time ago. Okay, now here's something else. This is a form of Chinese, a traditional form of Chinese storytelling. Some of it is memorized, but some of it is eventually improvised. But listen for the chanting, the repetition of melodic patterns.
我想人生一路要碎人啊了，嗰啲長難一路地翻跳啊，嗰啲跳過你嘅線水外嘅入八擺，嘅人人高高都你要掛碎lên咯。
You see, every line ends with something like that. I'm not very good at it.
人生要存快幾兩日，我哋現老當真上難咯。
Mr. Ng Shengqi is a rare public performer of the storytelling songs known as mukyu. Many of the songs he sings have been sung for centuries in the fields and homes of southern China.
花間你海嘅個熱花人浪話沙場啊！
我令人生個風要放一大件，會上門富春啊光。
你話個世間我笑要變化啦嚇，嗰啲醫生老了為個水忙啦。
This is actually in my hometown, New York City, in Chinatown, where many senior Chinese people are, at old age senior citizen centers, and sometimes they perform for each other these traditional art forms from their homeland. Let me skip Africa, Yugoslavia. Oh, okay. This lady is a Christian preacher. And, I'm not religious, but I've included this because purely because she's such a great speaker. She uses a number of verbal arts, including the repetition, including melody, and including affirmative responses. An affirmative response is, ah, yes. Like in Vilupatu, somebody will say something and the other person will say, ah, ah, ah. So in Christian churches, the people will say amen after somebody says something, amen. But she doesn't wait for that. She gives the amen to herself. And at moments, the organist comes in to give a little melody at the end of a line. Take a listen.
Get amen, sin of hope sensitized to the really needs of people. Because I feel as a whole, many of us cannot, amen, understand what Brother Paul was saying. Paul was writing to the church at Corinth, and they were, praise God, baptized believers. But Paul said, now listen, who comforted us in all our tribulations. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, Lord, you wouldn't be here today hadn't God comforted you, hadn't God had understanding for you, hadn't God had love for you. Oh, Lord, thank you, Jesus. When he received you, some of you were prostitutes. When he received you, some of you were dope addicts. When he received you, some of you were staying with men. When he received you, some of you were bar hoppers. When he received you, some of you were backsliders. Thank you, Jesus.
Okay, so you see how that lady preacher really gets people worked up with all these different techniques. And then finally, here is some Vilupatu from Mrs. S. Saraswati, based in Nagercoil. And, with Vilupatu, it's part talking, part singing. And it culminates often in the traditional style with people in the audience feeling that the God has come into their body, a form of sami. So the act of narration is an act of calling the God into the body. When you tell the story, because they're telling the story of a god or goddess at the festival day in the temple. So the act of narration is an act of invocation, saying, come, be here with us. Usually the storyteller herself doesn't get inspired like that, but you'll see there are people in the audience who do.
தேவேந்திரனுடைய வெள்ளை யானையானது கடலோரத்தில் ஆகாய மார்க்கமாகவே போகின்றதா? என்னனே?
இல்ல யானை ஆகாய மார்க்கத்துல போன்னு சொன்னீங்க.
ஆமா.
ஆகாயத்துல யானை எதுக்கு போகுது?
ஏமா எதற்காக போகுதும்மா?
புல்லு திங்கிறதுக்கு.
ஆமா, உங்க அப்பா வீட்டு புல்லு ஆகாயத்துல இருக்குது. அந்த புல்ல போய் இந்த யானை திங்கிறதுக்கு போகிறது.
It's young girls, never young boys for some reason. Young girls. See, this lady is asking him a question. You know, how can I help my grandson pass his exam? Or something like that. Or how can I help my daughter get pregnant? Something very practical. And the hope is that this man who is inspired by the God will be able to give an answer. But this is a part of storytelling. There are many styles of traditional storytelling, and especially from Africa out to the Pacific, that culminate in this sort of, in English it's called spirit possession. Okay, stop that. And now just a few scenes from Diane Ferlat. This is her at the Istanbul Storytelling Festival a number of years ago.
Excuse me, we call it in English, we call it as what, sir? I didn't get it.
In English, when we feel that someone is, you know, that when that person feels that a god or goddess has come into them, we call that spirit possession.
Okay, spirit possession.
In Tamil Nadu, it's called Sami.
Okay.
And it often happens after the story of that divine figure has been told. The storytelling functions as an invocation for the spirit to come. Okay, so Diane Ferlat, she likes to create a rhythm by beating her stick on the floor, but she doesn't want to damage the wooden stage. So she brings her own little platform. You'll see. Okay, why don't you try that in itself for a moment? She'll start saying, I'm so glad I'm here. 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 Okay, so just say it 4 or 5 times, starting with just speaking it and eventually moving into a melody with it. Just repeat it again and again. Okay, good. Okay, I'm skipping ahead. She's talking now about back in the days of slavery in the USA, you know, because African people were taken to the USA as slaves. Sometimes the people in the big mansion, the slave owners, would finish with some meat and with the bones and then just give the bones to the slaves for them to make soup out of the bones. And the slaves would pass the bones from one house to another because you know, different people making soup. So this is how she tells it with rhythm and rhyme and melody. Let's see. Okay, you see what she's doing with that flavor? She's elongating it, a little melody and a little body action. Flavor.
Sorry, I'm not able to see anything.
Yeah, me too. I can't see anything, Eric.
You're not seeing anything?
No, the
No,
old
Eric.
screen is
Yeah,
still
the
there.
screen
is frozen. The
Yeah, the
old
Ville
screen.
part, you know, picture is still, we can't see anything.
Is anybody seeing Diane Ferlat?
No, no, no. All of us are able to see only the previous screen share of that
Okay,
event.
just a minute. I'll go out of screen share and come back into it. Stop share. Okay, we're back in regular, right? Okay, now let's go into screen share. And everyone is seeing a moving picture? Vinita, you're not seeing a moving picture of me and you and everybody?
Yes, everyone
Yeah.
is. Yes.
Okay, there we go. Screen share again. Now we're in. Now do you see Diane Ferlat? Yes, okay, good. Let me go back just a little bit. Because I was talking about that flavor, right? So you should see how she does the flavor.
Took the ham bone out and gave it to their neighbor. Put it in their beans to give their beans flavor. Took the ham bone out and gave it to their neighbor. Put it in their pot to give their beans flavor. That old ham bone went from shack to shack to shack to shack. And that's where that song comes from. Ham bone, where you been? Round the world and back again. And that world was the only world they knew. But by passing that ham bone from shack to shack to shack, they created something, a community. It's the same with stories. When you passed and share our stories from person to person, place to place around this world, we are creating something, a larger community.
Okay, so you're seeing Diane now, right? Good. Okay, I'm going ahead. We're just going to listen to a couple more minutes, and then it's going to be your turn. 9. Here's some repetition.
They were born in the same village. They grew up together. They played together. They worked together. They did everything together.
She actually likes her audience members to finish a sentence for her.
And you won't believe this. They married sisters from the same family and built their houses right across the road from each other. And every night they ate dinner at one of the other's house. It's what you call good friends. Well, one day, Papa Legba, just for a little fun, went walking down the road. And he was wearing this beautiful fila. Now, a fila is a small hat or cap. And Papa Legba, he's walking down the road, because he liked to walk, eh? And he stopped right in front of the friends' houses. And there they were, out in the yard, working. And to get their attention, he said, "Ahem. Ahem." And this friend, he looks up and said, "Ah." And this friend looks up and said, "Oh." And Papa Legba continued what he was doing, walking.
Here, I'm going to skip because of the time. The thing is, he's wearing a jacket. On one side it's blue, on one side it's red. And so people on one side say he was wearing a blue jacket. And the people on the other side say he's wearing a red jacket. So they get into an argument. So the point, one point of it is that, you know, what you know depends on the limited amount that you see. And here she goes into sort of the conclusion. Again, she starts by talking and it becomes a melodic expression.
Because you're human beings. And when human beings, when you only see one side at a time, your side, you fight and you argue. And Papa Legba, he turned and he left. So the next time you argue with your siblings, with your children, with your husband, let that little bit of a story come into your heart and help you like it does me. And remember, there are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. There are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. There are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. Every story, oh, there are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. There are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. There are two sides, two sides, two sides, two. Every story. The mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. Huh? And stories, the stories we tell are like the ropes on that parachute.
Okay, just one more little sequence. She is married to a European American man, a white man, and I believe they adopted a European American young man who had, it seems, a little bit of an identity crisis, whether he was African American or European American. So she tells that story in there. But let's see, before she gets to that, she tells a story from Aesop's Fables to illustrate the situation with her son. Let's see.
His head was long, his nose was flat.
Yeah, she's talking about Aesop. It turns out Aesop was a slave from Africa. Aesop was a black African man. But he was such a good teacher that he was finally given his freedom. And so this, she's talking about Aesop and a particular story by Aesop.
But he said, no one will listen. People laughed at him, made fun of him. And do you know why they laughed at him? Huh? Because they say, his head was long, his nose was flat, his skin was black, his lips were thick, had a hump on his back, his belly was large, his legs were bold. But what they didn't know, that little slave Aesop, he had a heart of gold and a head full of ideas and stories and lessons to teach. But he said, no one will listen.
Okay, and then she tells the story, but you got the repetition there, right? His head was round, his nose was this, his hair was this, his mouth was that, but he had a heart of gold. Okay, so now she tells a story, and she relates it to her son, 2020.
My son Joey was adopted by me and my husband when he was 3.5 years old. And Joey is a mixture of two cultures. He's a mixture of the black culture and the white culture. But Joey just happens to look more white than black. And when he went to elementary school, things were fine. When he got to middle school, when he got to high school, I don't know why some kids are so mean. Do you know what they call my son Joey? Hey, white boy. Hey, mayonnaise. Hey, a wannabe. Joey said, no, man, I'm black. But they were calling him names. They were putting him down. They made Joey feel so bad inside. Guess what he did? Just like that donkey, Joey tried to become somebody else. Because you will do that when you don't know who you are. And Joey, he watched some of the black kids in my neighborhood who wore their pants low. Joey wanted to be cool. He didn't want to be laughed at. So he wore his pants twice as low. It looked like he had pooped in his pants. Joey watched some of the black kids who had a cool walk. Joey wanted to be cool, didn't want to be put down. He tried to cool up his walk. And Joey watched some of the black kids in my neighborhood who had a cool talk. He wanted to be cool. He didn't want to be laughed at. So Joey tried to cool up his talk. He really did. Yo, what's up? Peace out. He was trying to be so black and so cool. Guess what? Got kicked out of school. But not just that school, 4 other schools. When Joey was going to school in Oakland, California, where I live in America, he was cool. And I shipped him north to Maine. He was cold. Mr. Cool was cold. But he finally graduated from high school in Maine, where it was cold. And when he finished, he didn't just graduate, he graduated with honors. And guess where he went then? Down to San Diego, Southern California, where it's warm. But Joey, when he was a little boy, he heard that cute little Aesop fable about the donkey and the lion skin. But now Joey understands the story. And he understands now that the only skin he needs is the skin he's in. Because you can't change it. And if people don't like it, too bad. It's better to be yourself. Better to be yourself. Don't end up like that donkey. It's better to be yourself. Before you say an ugly word, stop and count to 10. And then if you want to say that word, stop and count again. Don't let your tongue be tied in the middle and loose from end to end. You gotta think twice and then speak once, because donkeys can't count to 10. Hee-haw, and donkeys can't count to 10.
It's better to be yourself.
You see, she's mixing 3 different styles of delivery. Singing, it's better to be yourself. And she probably started with, or she could have started with, you know, it's better to be yourself. It's better to be yourself. It's better, it's better, it's better to be yourself. Now she's got a rhythm going and she's doing something like rap. It's maybe not exactly rap, but it's a very rhythmic talk. And then she goes back to just talking to people. So these are 3 very distinct ways of speaking in this little segment.
Better to be yourself. Don't end up like that donkey. It's better to be yourself. Yes.
Okay, we've gone overtime. Stop share. And I'm going to stop the recording now.